It's almost time for the last 9 days of the world to begin. The second core of Bleach the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime is nearly here, and I'm very excited, for a few reasons. I can't wait to see all the moments from the source material that I've played out in my head for years come to life, but I'm especially excited to see whatever new content they've got planned for us. I'm kind of expecting this to be a jam-packed 13 episodes, and honestly, I'm all for it. This core, this slate of episodes, is going to start from chapter 543, and while we don't know the specific endpoint yet, or at least I don't as I'm trying to avoid what I can, it's clearly going to be covering a lot of material, as well as hopefully filling in some of the key gaps that began to spring up in the arc around this time. And that's honestly part of why I'm so excited for this set, even compared to the first core. That first part of the 1000-Year Blood War didn't really need to be amended at all. It's roundly considered to be amazing by the community. However, from here, things get a little crazier, a little more ambitious, huge milestone fights take place, and this is where memories are really going to be made. I'd argue the second Quincy invasion is the real bulk of the arc, and so it's here that the 1000-Year Blood War anime's legacy will really begin to be forged. As a result of the inherent busyness of this portion of the story, where so many characters are coming together, including for some protracted fight scenes, a fair bit of content was either skipped over, sped through, or took place off-screen. That's why the idea of brand new content is so tantalizing, and for a fan like myself, the real draw of this new set of episodes. So, in this video, I wanted to rattle off some new things, new content, new moments and scenes that I'd love to see show up in Core 2 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, to drum up some hype and hopefully act as a conduit, a vessel for your own excitement too. Now, I'm absolutely aware going into this that we are almost certainly not going to get maybe even half of these. I'm just grateful we're getting new content at all, but it's just for a bit of fun. So, without further ado, let's get into it. But before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video when you're done with it, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. And if you want to take that support for me another step further, I do have a Patreon as well. And as always, a massive shout out and a huge thank you goes out to everyone supporting me over there on Patreon. As always, I really do appreciate each and every one of you. And of course, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. So, kicking off the list with number 9. Now, we know that Ichigo's training in the inner sanctum with Ichibei is going to be shown to us. In fact, for those who watched the early screenings, it probably already has been, as I'm anticipating it to occur very early on in the core. But we need to see this training play out, ideally from start to finish. Now that Ichigo has his true Zanpakuto, courtesy of Oetsu and his forge, he has unlocked his complete potential as a perfect hybrid, and is taking his first steps into an incredible new world. This is maybe the most important training sequence he's ever had, yet in the source material, it's totally missing. So if the anime is going to give us this, and it looks like it absolutely will, then it needs to be done properly, and it needs to be done some kind of justice. From the brief snippets we see in the trailer, Ichigo definitely seems to be struggling immensely, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Ichibei, himself an ancient and all-powerful being in the world of Bleach, actually has up his sleeve for our main character. It'll be great to see exactly how Ichigo becomes the monster he is when he arrives on the battlefield a little later on, and how he first becomes accustomed to not only his new power, but presumably his new blades too. Overall, seeing his training sequence fully will just add much needed context to where Ichigo's currently at in terms of his overall strength. Plus, it'll just be great to have valuable insight into an aspect of the royal palace that went virtually completely unexplored before, which was always really strange when you consider Ichibei is the leader and the most revered and important of the Zero Division in the first place. Presumably, once Renji and Rukia became accustomed to the incredibly dense Reiatsu lingering around Ichibei's shrine, this, what we're about to see with Ichigo, is where they were led next. We have no idea, which is why it'll be great to see this at last. This next one is a little bit niche. I'm probably the only person that wants to see this, but I'd love to see the battle between Komamura and his grandfather. It doesn't have to be long at all. I'd be happy for the scenes to be interspersed during Komamura's present battle with Bambietta, for example, but I think this would be a great addition. First and foremost, it gives Komamura a much-needed win, and while he still takes the win in the source material, the fact that it happens completely off-screen dilutes it a bit. Secondly, and perhaps more interestingly, it would give us a little more time with Komamura's grandfather, who is a fascinating character, a remnant from a bygone age rarely visited in Bleach lore. Does the grandfather just fight like a gigantic feral wolf? Perhaps the beast tried to savage Komamura with its enormous maw. Just the idea of Komamura taking him on and actually bringing him down is impressive to me, and it seems like the captain probably accomplished this without his Zanpakuto too, meaning this is a brute force fight predominantly, which would also be awesome to see. But it may also provide us with valuable insight, not only into the mysterious Beast Clan itself and their workings, but also into how Komamura himself may be able to continue doing battle even after he is transformed into a beast of revenge. In fact, why stop at Komamura versus the Elder? I'd love to see a few new, smaller fights too, smaller being the key word there, like Rangiku versus Kangdu, Byakuya versus numerous sternritter at once, and maybe even something like Renji versus Nanana, though I wonder if that last scene might just be cut completely. Now, there's positively loads of fights that take place during the second Quincy invasion, and obviously I'm hoping we see them all, but I'm greedy. I want more where possible. I'd love to see extensions of many of the fights that simply didn't get enough time at all. We're talking short but genuinely great duels like Soifon versus BG9, or of course the long-lamented Toshiro versus Kangdu. I've heard via osmosis that Toshiro and Matsumoto vs Bazby has been extended, which is fantastic, but personally, I didn't think that fight was a real candidate for extra content, to be honest. It's already decently long as it is. Other fights I'd love to see get a bit more, well, love, include Rosen Kensei versus Mask Demasculine, as both of those captains are very underserved characters with unique and interesting powers. Giving us a little more time with Rose's bankai, for example, would be wonderful. And the same goes true for Ichigo's confrontation with the 8th Sternritter towards the midpoint of the invasion. I appreciate that Ichigo is attempting to get to Yhwach and therefore isn't really paying them any heed, but there's no reason why he can't have an additional scrap with them before Yhwach announces he's ascending to the royal palace. It's interesting to think about. A fair few of these entries revolve around giving Ichigo more screen time with the audience. Like Komamura's battle with his grandfather before it, this next one is perhaps a bit niche, but as a big fan of the Sternritter, I was always disappointed that we never learned what the shrifts were for both Sternritter K BG9 and Sternritter N Robert Akatrone. Despite these guys having extremely slick and cool designs in my opinion, they're both underutilised in the end, and are the only Sternritter for whom we never learned their epithet. Well, the anime is the perfect opportunity to put that right, and honestly, I'm expecting them to do it. It just makes so much sense, and it really wouldn't be difficult to do even if they just appear on their title card splash screens. I know we all have our theories. Based on the way he was continuously gathering data during his battle with Soifon, I've always thought BG9 was probably K for the knowledge or something akin to that, while Robert's is a little more nebulous. That being said, I predicted his shrift was the Navigate a few years back, and that it let him identify and immediately exploit his enemies' blind spots, which is how he got behind Kyoraku and appeared immediately beside both Ichigo and Lil Toto without being spotted. Considering the anime has gone out of its way so far to give us little extra tidbits of information that have been so wonderful to see, I fully expect to get these unknown shrifts here. BG9's may even appear very quickly, with his battle likely taking place, I'd have thought, in episode 2. In fact, maybe his shrift is already known to those who saw the early previews. Regardless, I'm really hoping we get these answers and can slot in the last 2 pieces of the shrift puzzle once and for all. Following on from number 6, I'm just so excited to see more of the Sternritter in general. From the trailer we got, we can already see brand new scenes featuring these characters, and I will take whatever I can get. We already know we're getting new content for the Bambis, which is fantastic. Maybe that'll include actual battle scenes for Lil Toto and Meninas, and I'm really hoping that we get additional flashbacks for a lot of these guys, since virtually all of them were left with little to no context whatsoever. On top of that, I'm hoping they don't cut the few flashbacks we already did get, like for Asnod, as I love that, even though it's absolutely tiny, and they did cut the flashback for Lloyd and Royd in the first course, so that's got me a little concerned. Not only that, but I'm hoping that many of the Sternritter who were underdeveloped, who were underused, get something of a chance to shine. Specific examples range from the more obvious candidates, characters like Kangdu, Robert Akatrone, and more absolutely need a little bit more to do, even if it just means extending Kang's battle against Hitsugaya and actually showing his holy form, or even giving Robert a fight at all. Going back to my earlier entry about extending certain fights, I could definitely see the anime adding some extra scenes showcasing Byakuya's bout against all of those Sternritter at once, including Robert. And then there are other Sternritter who might not be as clear candidates for extra screen time, such as Gremmy, who I'd love to see outside of his fateful battle with Zaraki. Give him something else to do, include him in the world outside of that vacuum of a fight. Finally, while not technically a Sternritter, I'd also love to see and hear more about Yhwach himself, including some insight into his past that we desperately need. The first cour already gave us something we really wanted in a surprising look at the war from 1,000 years ago. So now I'm hoping the second cour goes even deeper. Overlaying new flashback content on top of the chapter God Like You would be amazing, for example. And learning more about Yhwach's earliest days will tie in nicely to another entry I have a little bit later on in the list. The reason this next one isn't higher on the list is simply because I'm not convinced we're getting this in this cour, and that's the Zero Division versus the Schutzstaffel showdown. If it was a guaranteed lock that this battle would be happening in the next 13 episodes, this would probably be number 1, to be honest. But as it is, I'm still hoping the second cour isn't going to stretch quite this far. However, if it does, I'm definitely hoping we get to see a proper battle take place between these two sides. Of all the fights that need extending, this one is so necessary in my mind that it deserves its own spot regardless of how certain I am of it actually showing up. As I've mentioned in the past, this fight has a lot of really great build-up, but it's mostly just an incredible tease. As soon as the fight looks like it's going to take off, it immediately ends. Whatever happens of real consequence happens off-screen while Ichibei is battling Yhwach. Now, I appreciate that we won't see everything the Schutzstaffel members can do, even if the fight is extended, since they're going to be getting major fights later on down the line, but we can at least drop some hints and teases as to the true power and true nature of their shrifts. However, this is the last time we'll see the Zero Division members in the story unless they get extra scenes as well, so why not let them go all out? Within reason, anyway. It would be great to see the Shikai of characters like Hikifune or Senjumaru, or just get an explanation for what Tenjiro's Shikai actually does. I personally always found it a little ironic that it was the Zero Division that we were so incredibly excited to see for so many years. They were such highly anticipated characters. But when everything was all said and done, it turned out that Yhwach's Royal Guard ended up getting far more spotlight despite being introduced far later and with no hype whatsoever, including frankly excellent fights. Coming in at number 3, one of the biggest shock reveals from the original trailer for Cour 2 was of course the fact that Shinji Hirako's Bankai Sakashima Yokoshima Happo Fusagari is going to be revealed in this cour. This is obviously huge news and represents one of the biggest additions to the anime so far. Previously revealed in the supplementary novel Can't Fear Your Own World, Shinji using his Bankai in the 1,000-Year Blood War marks a pretty major departure from the canon source, but one that I'm thrilled to see nonetheless. More changes like this, and it'll become difficult to discern which source should actually be the go-to by the end. Now, of course, this is new content that we know we are getting, much like Ichigo's training, which is very exciting. From the brief snippet we saw in the trailer, which was already probably too much, the activation of his Bankai looks amazing, with Shinji facing down a small army of Soldat. The Bankai's activation looks decidedly menacing, which is great, and I can't wait to see it play out. The novels are all well and good, but there's something about seeing it, either in the pages of the source material or being brought to life on screen, that really helps to cement it for me. I think I just enjoy that visual aspect. After all, it's a firmly visual series. Of course, questions still remain as to where and when he'll use his bankai. Personally, I still think it'll happen around chapter 581, but we'll have to see the episode to know for sure. I'm just hoping that since they are actually giving us his bankai after all, it gets a good and proper showcase that helps to satisfy everyone. Recently, as part of his Club Outside Q&A, that wonderful font of knowledge we occasionally draw from, Kubo revealed that yes, the Soul King has an actual, formal, personal name, and that even more excitingly, we may actually hear it in the anime. This tells me one crucial thing, that we're likely to see the Soul King in some kind of capacity that we don't in the source material. Now, I have no idea what form this may take. It's almost certainly going to be a flashback, and personally, if someone's going to be calling him by his actual name, I have to assume that's going to be before he was mutilated, as giving someone a proper name helps to make them more relatable, whereas the Soul King we know today is little more than a faceless mannequin. To this day, the Soul King, or Ryo, which I believe is just Japanese for the Soul King as we've always known him, remains one of Bleach's most elusive mysteries, even with the extra information we gleaned from Can't Fear Your Own World. Getting more exposition on him, his nature, his origins, his backstory, when he's so crucial to this arc's central conflict, makes loads of sense, and remains one of the utmost major things I really want to see from COUR 2 and beyond. Now, like I said, I have no idea what, if anything, we'll see. It may even just be the briefest of flashes, but the original trailer for COUR 2 definitely seemed to hint at a glimpse of the Soul King before he was mutilated, and that itself is really something. Again, getting the chance to see the Soul King treated as an actual person, maybe even with dialogue of his own, would be absolutely incredible to see, and something I genuinely never anticipated, never expected, never even dared dream of, as the Soul King has always remained so far removed from really everything else in the story. He is the nexus, he is the central focal point of some of Bleach's absolute earliest points in the timeline that I would absolutely just love to see. So I'm really hoping that maybe we do get some kind of a decent flashback for this character at long last. We know that Ichibei is getting additional scenes and coverage in this COUR. He himself is also a fascinating enigma, to be fair, and if anyone is going to be the perfect conduit for delivering information on the Soul King, it's either going to be him or Yhwach. Regardless, anything new on the Soul King is precious for the lore and world building of Bleach, and of course I'll absolutely take it. It's possible that what we get, again, may not even be in this COUR, but it's possible we'll see the history of the Soul King's mutilation as was told in Can't Fear Your Own World. One of Can't Fear Your Own World's major reveals is already being transferred to the 1000-Year Blood War arc in the form of Shinji's bankai, so why stop there? Why not take the time to include the history of Ryo himself? For now, it's impossible to know for sure, but new information on Ryo is something I am very excited to see, almost regardless of what it actually turns out to be. Now, as we reach the end of the list, I look back at the entries so far and think it probably could have been longer. There's just so much new content I am hopeful to see, I'm excited to see, ranging from extensions to fights to flashbacks and more. But one thing I'm very curious about is of course this mysterious new fight that we've been speculating about for a while now. And at this point, coming in at number 1, I'd love for that to be Ichigo versus Uryu. Not only does it make total sense within the context of the story, but it is absolutely something that should have happened in the source material. And it's so easy to slot in too. Ichigo races to confront Yhwach as he prepares to ascend to the palace towards the kind of midpoint, just slightly over the midpoint of the second invasion, only for Uryu to suddenly launch an arrow at him. In horror, as he deflects the arrow, Ichigo questions what Uryu is doing there, but Uryu leaps down and faces off against his former friend under the watchful eyes of the Quincy King. They then clash, still having the same conversation they did in the original chapter, but this time while actually fighting at the same time. It's an explosive battle that causes both Shinigami and Quincy to stop in their tracks and watch, which of course pays off Yuha Buck's earlier comment about everyone witnessing Uryu's power for themselves. If the fight doesn't turn out to be Ichigo versus Uryu, then I question really what could be important enough to take its place when it seems like such an obvious candidate, such an obvious great fit. But, I mean, I'm always open to new content, and a new fight is particularly exciting, so I'm hoping for something amazing regardless. But for me, considering the theming of the arc, of the core in particular, considering the way the marketing has been so fixed on what seems like the inevitability of these two former friends coming together in a terrible battle that truly highlights the Shinigami versus Quincy divide, Ichigo versus Uryu is what I'm absolutely hoping to see, and is the new thing I need to see the absolute most from COUR 2. In my mind, it would fill a massive void left over from the source material. Well, that's the list, and as I said at the start, I'm absolutely aware and appreciate that we almost certainly won't get all of this. I'm grateful, to be honest, we seem to be getting as much new content as we are already, so really I'm content with it. But as a wish list, I think this works, and it's just for fun anyway. No matter what we get, I have a feeling we're in for an absolutely amazing 13 episodes to come, and if there is something new that you want to see, I hope you get it. Anyway, this is my last video before I go off to get married, so I just want to say one last time, a huge thanks to everyone for the constant support, well wishes and kind words. Jade and I, we really do appreciate it. I hope everyone loves the first episode of the second COUR, and I'll see you on the 10th for a live reaction. But until then, guys, make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what brand new things you need to see from COUR 2. And until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.